Late at night, when the world goes silent, someone always stays behind. They sweep the empty halls, clean the forgotten rooms, and walk the dark corridors most people avoid. They're the watchers of the night, the janitors. And while they see everything, sometimes something sees them back. These are the stories no one else tells, confessions from the caretakers of places that breathe after midnight. They've mopped up things that shouldn't exist, heard voices in rooms locked for years, and seen eyes staring from drains that were supposed to be empty. So tonight, turn off the lights and listen closely, because in the quiet hours between duty and dread, the line between the living and the dead fades away. Welcome to Veil of Dread Horror Stories, where the night shift never truly ends. Subscribe and step into the darkness with us. Story 1. The Basement Key. They always told me the basement was off limits, not in a casual way, not like don't touch the chemicals or that area's under renovation. No, this was different. The kind of rule that comes with lowered voices and glances over shoulders. I'd been working as a night janitor at the old St. Helena Vocational School for almost 6 years. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work. And for a man like me, quiet, middle-aged, no family left, that was enough. Every night I'd clock in at 10 p.m. sharp, grab my cart, and start my rounds. The building was old, cracked tiles, squeaky doors, and that strange, stale smell of dust and mold that never went away. But it was peaceful, predictable, until I found the key to discovery. It was a Thursday, cold rain hammering the windows, the kind of night where the world outside disappears behind fog and noise. I was sweeping near the science wing when my broom handle tapped something metallic under a locker. I crouched down and found a small brass key. No label, no tag, just a deep scratch across one side that looked almost like a number. 13. I figured it was from a lost cabinet or storage room, so I pocketed it and kept working. But as I turned the corner near the boiler room, something odd caught my eye. A rusted door I'd never seen before. The thing is, I'd cleaned that hallway hundreds of times. That wall had never had a door on it. Yet, there it was, chipped paint, metal handle, and a keyhole that looked like it had been waiting for years. My chest tightened, but curiosity got the better of me. I tried the key. It fit perfectly. The basement. The door creaked open, releasing a wave of cold, earthy air, like old concrete and rot. A narrow stairway spiraled downward, swallowed by darkness. Every instinct told me to turn around. But I've never been good at listening to instinct. I grabbed my flashlight from the cart and started down. The steps were slick, the air damp. My breath echoed louder than my footsteps. When I reached the bottom, I found an old maintenance corridor lined with pipes and breaker boxes, and something stranger, an old custodial room, almost identical to mine upstairs. Same shelves, same mop sink, same layout. But everything was covered in thick dust, as if no one had been down there for decades. And yet, the floor was wet. The smell, it was faint at first, like mildew, but then stronger, sour and metallic. Blood. My flashlight flickered as I approached the far corner. The light caught something dark pooled near the drain. I stepped closer and froze. It wasn't just liquid. It was thick, clotted, and it was moving, pulsing. I stumbled back, dropping my flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor and landed on a pair of old black work boots. Someone was standing in the corner. The janitor below. He looked just like me. Same uniform, same name tag, except his eyes. They were milky, white, like glass. His skin looked soaked, bloated, waterlogged. He opened his mouth, but instead of words, a wet gurgle poured out. And then, from the drain, I heard whispering. Thousands of whispers. The thing that wore my face began to move. Slow at first, dragging one foot, then faster. I ran up the stairs, slamming the door behind me so hard that the frame cracked. When I looked back, the brass key was still in my hand, but it was covered in dark, oily sludge. Aftermath. The next morning I tried to tell my supervisor, but he just laughed it off. Then he said something that chilled me. "You must have seen the old access door. That's been sealed for years. No way you opened it." I didn't argue. I just nodded and went home. But that night, when I returned for my shift, the key was gone. Weeks passed, and strange things started happening. My mop bucket would move on its own. Tools vanished, and sometimes, when I passed the boiler room, I'd hear a soft, scraping sound from behind the wall, like someone dragging a broom across concrete. The last shift. A month later, I came in for my regular shift and found my time card already punched. Someone had signed my name. I checked the security monitor. The feed was static, except for one frame frozen on the basement door. And taped to it was the brass key. I quit that night. But sometimes when I pass the school on my walk home, I see the basement lights flicker on for just a second. And through the window, I swear I can see a man mopping the floor, wearing my uniform. They say every building needs a caretaker, but some caretakers never leave. Story 2. The Night Shift at Hollow Creek Mall. The thing about working nights is you start hearing things that daylight hides. The hum of air vents, the faint pop of old lights, the sound of the building breathing. You tell yourself it's all normal, just part of the job. That's what I told myself too, until the night I worked at Hollow Creek Mall. The empty mall. It used to be a busy place in the 90s. Bright lights, loud music, kids hanging out by the food court. But by the time I got hired as the night janitor, it was a ghost town. Half the stores were closed, mannequins stood behind dusty glass, and the security cameras flickered every few minutes. My shift started at midnight. I'd clock in, grab my cart, and make my rounds. It wasn't bad work. Mostly trash pickup, bathroom cleaning, floor waxing. But every night I had this feeling that someone else was walking just out of sight. The echoes never matched my steps. The sound of the carousel. In the center of the mall was a small children's carousel. It hadn't worked in over 10 years. No power, no music. But on my third night, around 2:40 a.m., I heard it playing. The faint tune of "Pop Goes the Weasel" echoed through the empty hall. I froze. The power breakers were locked. No way it could have started on its own. I followed the sound to the atrium. The carousel was spinning slowly, the horses bobbing up and down. No one was there. But when I looked closely, I saw tiny handprints smeared across the painted horses. The security guard. The next night I mentioned it to the security guard. Old guy named Frank. He chuckled and said, "Yeah, you heard the carousel? It does that sometimes. Kid died there years ago, fell off, broke his neck. Power's been cut ever since, but it still runs. Guess he's still riding." He said it like a joke, but I noticed his hands were shaking when he lit his cigarette. Later that night, I passed the carousel again. This time it wasn't moving, but every single horse was turned to face the same direction, toward the maintenance hallway. The hallway lights. That hallway was always colder than the rest. It led to storage, old offices, and the mechanical control room. The lights buzzed low, flickering every few seconds. I was sweeping near the end when I saw a shape move. Small, fast, like a child running past. I followed, my flashlight beam trembling across the walls. "Hey!" I called out. "You can't be here. Mall's closed." No answer, just the faint sound of laughter echoing from somewhere ahead. When I reached the end of the hall, the door to the electrical room was wide open. Inside, every switch had been flipped on. The camera room, I radioed Frank, but he didn't answer. So I went to the security office myself. The monitors showed every corner of the mall, except mine. The hallway feed was pure static. Then one screen flickered to life. It showed me, standing right there, staring at the monitors. But behind me, there was a child. He stood barefoot, head tilted, clothes wet and torn. His reflection didn't move when I did. I spun around. Nothing. When I turned back, the camera screen showed only an empty hallway. The basement door. Frank came in later, pale and sweating. He told me to leave early, said the alarms had been glitching. But when I pressed him, he muttered, "There's a basement under the mall. It's sealed off. Don't ever go down there." That night I couldn't stop thinking about it. So, during my next shift, I found the access door he mentioned, behind a wall of storage crates near the food court. It was rusted shut, but someone had scratched words into the metal. "He's still down here." Descent. The lock was old. It broke easily. The stairs led deep beneath the mall, far below what I expected. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping water onto the concrete. The smell was awful. Mold, oil, and something sweet, like rotting fruit. At the bottom was a wide chamber filled with old carnival junk, ride parts, clown heads, broken horses from the carousel, and in the center, a small red tricycle. It began to move. The sound of wheels squeaking echoed around me, though nothing touched it. Then, from the shadows, I saw him, the child. He was holding a brass pole from the carousel, dragging it along the ground, his eyes blank and glassy. He looked right at me and whispered, "It's your turn." The ride. The carousel upstairs began to play. I could hear it, muffled through the ceiling. The chamber lights flickered red and white, spinning faster and faster until I couldn't see. When I woke up, I was lying in the middle of the mall atrium. My mop bucket overturned beside me. The carousel stood perfectly still. Only one horse was different. Its face was cracked open, and inside I could see an eyeball staring out. It blinked. Aftermath. I quit the next morning. Frank never showed up again. They told me he'd resigned without notice, but I knew better. 2 weeks later, the mall shut down completely. Sometimes, when I drive past the building at night, I can still hear faint music drifting from inside. Pop goes the weasel. And if you look through the glass doors long enough, you'll see the carousel moving again, with a new rider. Every mall needs someone to clean up after closing time. But at Hollow Creek, the mess never ends. Story 3. The School Custodian's Locker. The first thing they told me when I took the job at Ridgeway Middle School was, never use the last locker in the janitor's room. I thought it was a joke. Every workplace has its dumb superstitions. But after 3 months on the night shift, I stopped laughing. The old building Ridgeway wasn't your average school. It was built in the 1950s, expanded over the years, and patched together with newer wings that never quite fit. The walls creaked, the vents rattled, and sometimes the lights hummed like a voice you couldn't quite understand. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The hallways were silent except for the echo of my mop bucket wheels and the faint hum of the soda machines. I liked it that way. Quiet. Simple. Until the night I heard something tapping inside the custodian's locker room. The knocket was just past midnight. I'd finished the second floor and was refilling my bucket when the noise started. 3 sharp knocks, like knuckles against metal. I looked around. All the lockers were closed, except the last one, the one everyone said to stay away from. It was rusted, dented, and had a tag with the name E. Turner, a custodian who, according to the records, died on the job 20 years ago. Heart attack, they said. But the story the staff whispered was darker, that he'd been found inside that very locker. The first opening curiosity got the better of me. I knelt down and tugged at the handle. The lock had long been cut. The door creaked open with a metallic scream. Inside was an old mop, a set of cracked goggles, and a keyring. Everything smelled of bleach and rust, except the bottom shelf. That smelled like something rotten. And then I saw it, a photo. A black and white picture of a man in a janitor's uniform, smiling proudly beside a row of lockers. Number 9, the same locker I'd just opened, was behind him. As I stared at it, the edges of the picture began to darken, like smoke curling inward. The echo. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following me. The halls felt occupied. When I mopped the floors, there were footprints behind me, wet ones that weren't mine. At one point, I passed the trophy case near the gym, and in the glass, I saw a man walking beside me, but when I turned, the hallway was empty. The only sound was the faint squeak of a mop being wrung out somewhere in the distance. The smell of bleach. By week 2, the smell in the janitor's room had changed. It wasn't rot anymore. It was bleach, thick and burning. Even when I left the room, it followed me, clinging to my clothes, my hair, my skin. I asked the head custodian, Mr. Laird, about E. Turner. He went quiet and said, "Don't talk about him during your shift. If you mention his name after midnight, he listens." I thought he was trying to scare me. But that night, while mopping the first floor, I heard someone whisper my name in a voice that wasn't human. The locker opens again. It was 3:07 a.m. when I went back to the custodian's room. The locker was open again. Inside was the same mop and goggles, but now there was also a small wooden box sitting on the shelf. I hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of ID badges, all janitors. Some names I recognized, some I didn't. All had been punched out of the system years ago. At the bottom of the box was a badge with my name on it, but I'd never lost mine. The mirror trick. I decided to test myself. Maybe I was just overtired. There was a small mirror in the locker room, cracked and grimy. I stood in front of it and said, "E. Turner." Nothing happened. Then I saw movement, faint at first, then sharp. Behind me, the locker door slowly closed on its own. In the reflection, a man was standing next to me. Same uniform, pale face, empty eyes. His reflection smiled. Mine didn't. The possession. From that night on, I began losing time. I'd start cleaning the second-floor bathrooms, then blink, and suddenly I'd be standing in the basement hallway, drenched in sweat. My knuckles were raw, like I'd been scrubbing something for hours. On the cameras, they said they'd seen me talking to myself, pointing, arguing, laughing, but I don't remember any of it. One morning after a long shift, I checked the locker. Inside was a note, written in a black marker on a piece of mop cloth. Shift never ends. The final night. It was a Friday when it all came to a head. Around 4 a.m., the lights went out across the entire school. The generator kicked on, humming weakly. Through the emergency glow, I saw footprints on the wet floor, dozens of them, all leading to the custodian's room. The locker door was wide open, swinging slowly, and from inside came that same tapping. 3 sharp knocks. I stepped closer. "What do you want?" I whispered. The tapping stopped. Then, from the darkness, a voice hissed, "Your shift." The locker slammed shut, pinning my hand in the door. I screamed, but no one came. The next morning, when they found me, I was unconscious on the floor. The doctors said I'd collapsed from exhaustion, but the head custodian told me something worse. When they opened locker 9, it was empty. No mop, no box, no photo, nothing, except for a new name carved inside the door. Mine. Some jobs never end. They just wait for the next one to clock in.